Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
I hadn't danced since college. Haven't felt much of anything since well, since forever, really. My life had become this beige routine of spreadsheets and sensible shoes, of good morning to the barista who never remembered my name of Netflix. Binges that ended with me falling asleep on the couch, still in my work clothes. My sister Maya had been nagging me for months about getting out more, about living a little, as she put it. So when she dragged me to this dance studio downtown, some hole-in-the-wall place called Rhythm and Soul, I figured I'd humor her for an hour, maybe break a mild sweat, and then go home to my frozen dinner and latest true crime documentary. The studio was nothing special. Mirrors everywhere. That particular smell of sweat and ambition that clings to places where people chase dreams. I was adjusting my too tight leggings, already regretting this decision, when she walked in. Molly Vega. I didn't know her name then, of course. I just knew that suddenly the air in the room shifted, like when a storm's coming and you can feel it in your bones. She moved like water, like she was having a conversation with gravity and winning every argument. Dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, these incredible brown eyes that seemed to see right through everyone's bullshit. And this smile, this fucking smile that made you want to confess things you'd never even thought about doing. All right, beautiful people, she said, and even her voice was different. Husky, with this hint of an accent I couldn't place. We're going to learn something that'll make you feel alive. Fair warning, I don't do easy. She demonstrated the combination, and I swear, to God, time slowed down. Her hips rolled with this devastating precision, sweat already glistening on her collarbones. And when she threw her head back during this one move, I felt something crack open inside my chest. Oh fuck, I whispered, not meaning to say it out loud. She heard me. Of course she did. Instead of being embarrassed or annoyed, she grinned, this wicked, knowing grin that made my stomach flip. Show me what you've got, new girl, she said, extending her hand. Our palms connected, and I swear I felt electricity shoot straight up my arm. Not the kind of hand-holding you do with friends or family. This was different. This was dangerous. I'm Elaine, I managed to say, though my voice came out all breathy and weird. Molly, she replied, and the way she said it, like it was a secret she was trusting me with, made me want to hear her say my name the same way. The class was torture. Beautiful, exquisite torture. Every time she corrected my form, her hands. On my hips or shoulders, I felt like I might spontaneously combust. And the worst part? I was terrible at it. My body, which had been in hibernation for years, was suddenly being asked to do things it had forgotten how to do. But Molly was patient. More than patient, she was encouraging in this way that made you want to be better, not just at dancing, but at everything. Stop thinking so much, she said during one particularly disastrous attempt at a hip roll. Your body knows what to do. Trust it, trust it. When was the last time I trusted anything about myself? By the end of class, I was drenched in sweat, my legs were shaking, and I was pretty sure I'd made a fool of myself in front of everyone. But when Molly smiled at me as we were leaving, I felt more alive than I had in years. Same time next week? She asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good, she said. I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself. 3 weeks later, I was hooked. Not just on dancing, though. I'd gotten marginally less terrible at it, but on those moments when Molly's attention focused entirely on me, when she'd place her hands on my waist to adjust my posture, or when she'd smile that particular smile that seemed reserved just for me. I was staying after class to practice, trying to nail this combination that had been kicking my ass all week when Molly approached. Me. You know, she said, leaning against the mirror, you're getting good at this. I'm getting less catastrophically bad at it, I corrected, wiping sweat from my forehead. She laughed, this rich, warm sound that made my chest tight. You wanna really dance? Something in her tone made me look up. There was mischief in her eyes and something else. Something that made my pulse quicken. What do you mean? Instead of answering, she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back of the studio, through a door I'd never noticed before. It led to a corridor that smelled like old concrete and possibilities. Molly, where are we going? You'll see. The corridor opened into this massive space, an abandoned warehouse. All exposed brick and graffiti and flickering fluorescent lights. The distant sound of police sirens echoed from somewhere outside, but in here, it felt like we were in our own world. There were maybe 20 people scattered around the space, all moving to music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. No mirrors, no formal structure, just bodies expressing themselves in ways that felt raw and honest and completely uninhibited. This is where I really teach, Molly said, her voice low. The studio pays the bills, but this is where the magic happens. I watched, mesmerized, as dancers moved like they were exorcising demons, like they were making love to the air. Itself, it was beautiful and terrifying and completely illegal. I was sure. I don't know if I can do this, I said. Molly stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body. You can do anything. The music shifted, became something slower, more sensual. Bodies around us began moving differently, more intimately. And then Molly was pressing me against a rusted support beam, her hands on either side of my head, her face inches from mine. You're thinking too much, she whispered, and I could feel her breath on my lips. I always think too much, I replied, my voice barely audible. Then let me help you stop. She leaned in, and I thought she was going to kiss me. Instead, her teeth grazed my earlobe, and I gasped, my knees nearly giving out. Feel that? She whispered. That's what happens when you stop thinking. And God, she was right. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my mind went completely quiet. There was only sensation, the warmth of her body, the sound of her breathing, the way she smelled like vanilla and rebellion. When she pulled back, I was panting like I'd run a marathon. Now dance, she said, and somehow I did. Not well, not gracefully, but with everything I had. With my whole body, my whole heart. And when the music finally stopped, when the warehouse began to empty, I realized I'd crossed some invisible line. There was no going back to who I'd been before. After the warehouse, everything changed. Not just how I felt about dancing, but how I felt about everything. It was like I'd been living in black and white, and suddenly the world was in Technicolor. Molly and I started spending time together outside of class. Coffee dates that turned into hours of conversation about everything and nothing. Long walks through the city where she'd point out graffiti artists and tell me their stories. Dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where she knew the owners by name. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Passionate about everything art, music, justice, life itself. She had opinions about things I'd never even thought to have opinions about. She made me want to be more than I was. It was during one of these dinners, about a month after the warehouse, that I learned there was more to Molly than just dancing. I have to go to this thing tomorrow night, she said, picking at her pad thai. It's going to be boring as hell. But I have to be there. What kind of thing? Fundraiser. For the environmental collective I'm part of. I nearly choked on my spring roll. You're part of an environmental collective? She grinned, surprised. I mean, I knew you cared about stuff, but I didn't realize you were actually involved in organized activism. Oh, honey, she said, and the way she said honey made my stomach flip. I don't just care about stuff. I'm trying to save the fucking world. She told me about the collective, a group of young activists who've been organizing protests sit-ins and awareness campaigns about environmental issues in the city. They were particularly focused on water pollution, specifically targeting corporations that were dumping toxins into the local river system. "You should come with me," she said suddenly. "To the fundraiser?" "Why not? It'll be fun." Well, not fun exactly, but important. "And I'd like you there." The way she said it like it mattered. To her, whether I was there or not made my decision for me. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." The fundraiser was at this trendy downtown loft, full of people in expensive clothes talking about saving the planet while drinking champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I felt completely out of place in my department store dress, but Molly looked incredible in this flowing black dress that made her look like some kind of environmental warrior goddess. She introduced me to people whose names I immediately forgot, but what struck me was how they all looked at her. With respect, with admiration, with the kind of deference you show to someone who's actually making a difference. "Molly's our secret weapon," explained a woman named Sarah, the collective's coordinator. "She has this way of getting people to pay attention." "What do you mean?" "You'll see." What I saw was Molly giving a speech about water pollution that was so passionate, so compelling, that the entire room fell silent. She talked about children getting sick, about ecosystems dying, about the moral imperative to act. But more than that, she made it personal. She made everyone in that room feel like they had the power to change things. "The biggest polluter in our region," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "is Viga Corporation. They've been dumping chemical waste into the Clearwater River for decades, and they've been getting away with it because they have money and lawyers and politicians in their pocket." The room erupted in applause, and I felt this surge of pride watching her up there, commanding attention, making people care. It wasn't until later, as we were walking back to my apartment, that I realized what she'd said. "Viga Corporation?" I said, "Viga dot dot like your last name." She stopped walking. In the streetlight, I could see her face change, become guarded. "Yeah," she said quietly, "like my last name. Molly dot dot dot." "It's my father's company," she said, the words coming out like they hurt. "Richard Viga, CEO and chief destroyer of everything I care about." I stared at her, pieces clicking into place. "You're protesting your own father's company." "I'm protesting the company that's been poisoning our water supply for 20 years. The fact that my name is on the building is just a cosmic joke." We walked the rest of the way in silence, and when we got to my door, she turned to face me. "Does it change things?" she asked, knowing who I am. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who turned my world upside down, who danced like she was fighting for her life, who stood up in front of rooms full of people and demanded they care about something bigger than themselves. "It makes me admire you even more," I said. She kissed me then. Finally, after weeks of almost touches and loaded glances, she kissed me. It was soft and fierce and desperate all at once, and when we broke apart, I was breathless. "I've wanted to do that for so long," she whispered. "Then why didn't you?" "Because once I started, I didn't think I'd be able to stop." I pulled her closer. "Then don't stop." The next 3 months were the most intense of my life. Molly and I fell into this rhythm where we'd spend our days planning protests and our nights, discovering each other in ways that left me dizzy and desperate for more. She was everything I didn't know I needed. Passionate and fierce and completely unafraid of feeling things deeply. She made me want to be braver, to care more, to live like it mattered. The collective's campaign against Viga Corporation was gaining momentum. We organized sit-ins, created viral social media campaigns, and held protests that drew hundreds of people. Local news stations started covering our demonstrations, and politicians began making statements about environmental protection. But the more successful we became, the more I noticed Molly withdrawing. She'd get these phone calls that would make her face go pale, conversations she'd have to take in private. She'd disappear for hours at a time, claiming she was meeting with other activists, but something felt off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of leading a movement against her own father's company was getting to her. But then I started noticing other things. How she always seemed to know exactly what Viga Corp's next move would be. How she'd steer us away from certain targets, claiming they weren't strategic. How she'd sometimes get information about the company's activities that she couldn't adequately explain. It all came to a head on a rainy Tuesday night in November. I was at Molly's apartment, supposedly helping her prepare for a press conference, when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her whole body tensed. "I need to take this," she said, heading toward the bedroom. But she didn't close the door all the way, and I could hear fragments of the conversation. "Dad, I can't keep doing this. I know what we agreed, but people are starting to ask questions. No, she doesn't suspect anything, but..." My blood turned to ice. She was talking about me. About me not suspecting something. I stood up, moving closer to the door, my heart pounding. "The protest tomorrow, yes, I can make sure they target the East facility instead of the main plant. I understand the shipment is coming through there, but if we redirect them, ... I couldn't breathe. She was feeding information to her father. She was sabotaging our own protests. When she came back out, she was smiling, but it looked strained. "Sorry about that," she said. "Activist stuff, you know how it is." "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I know how it is." The next few days were torture. I watched her at meetings, listened to her give passionate speeches about environmental justice, saw her comfort other activists when they were frustrated by our lack of concrete progress. And all the while, I knew she was the reason we weren't making progress. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong so badly it physically hurt, but I had to know for sure. I started investigating, quietly, carefully, using skills I'd learned in my previous life as a research analyst. I dug through public records, cross-referenced dates and locations, followed paper trails that led to shell companies and offshore accounts. What I found made me sick. Viga Corporation had been funding environmental groups for years, but not to support them, to control them, to make sure their protests were ineffective, their targets were wrong, their timing was off. And Molly had been the inside person, the one feeding them information, the one making sure that despite all our passion and dedication, we'd never actually threaten their bottom line. The final piece of evidence was a series of bank transfers, payments to an account under Molly's name, dating back to long before I'd met her. Before she'd started the collective, she'd been working for her father all along. I confronted her on a Thursday night, documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene, which I guess they were. "You knew," I said when she walked through the door. My voice was shaking, but I was proud of how steady the words came out. "Knew what?" she asked, but I could see in her eyes that she already understood. "About the payments. About the inside information. About how you've been sabotaging everything we've worked for." She stared at the documents, her face going pale. "Elaine, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been lying to me for months. How you've been lying to everyone. How you've been playing activist while actually working for the enemy." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Molly?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're a fraud. It looks like everything about you is a lie." She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "I've been trying to stop him," she said. Quietly, "I've been trying to stop him since I was 16 years old. By working for him, by working from the inside, by making sure their worst projects never got off the ground, by feeding them information that would make them think they were winning while actually limiting the damage they could do. I stared at her. You're telling me this whole thing, the collective, the protests, all of it was what, a long con? No, she said, and there were tears in her eyes now. No, that's real. My feelings about the environment, about justice, about changing the world, that's all real. But I couldn't do it openly. If I just refused to work with him, if I just walked away, he would have found other ways to neutralize threats. This way, I could at least have some control. And the payments? I donated them all. Every single dollar went to legitimate environmental organizations. I kept records I can show you. That's not the point, Molly. The point is you lied to me. You let me believe in something that wasn't real. What we have is real, she said, standing up, reaching for me. Whatever else is complicated, whatever else is fucked up, what we have is real. I stepped back, away from her touch. Is it? Because I don't even know who you are anymore. That's when we heard the car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I could see black SUVs, men in suits. Shit, Molly whispered. He knows. Who knows what? My father. He knows I've been keeping things from him. He knows I've been protecting you. The front door burst open, and suddenly my apartment was full of men with badges and serious expressions. Molly Vega, one of them said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage." As they read her rights, as they cuffed her hands behind her back, she looked at me with such desperate intensity that I felt it in my bones. "I need you to know," she said, "that every single thing I felt for you is real. Every touch, every kiss, every moment, that was me. The real me." And then they were taking her away, and I was left alone with a stack of documents and the wreckage of everything I'd believed in. I didn't sleep for 3 days after they arrested Molly. I couldn't eat, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except pace around my apartment and try to make sense of what had happened. The media coverage was brutal. Environmental activist arrested for corporate espionage. Vega heiress betrays father's company. Inside the conspiracy that rocked the environmental movement. But the more I read, the more I realized that the story being told wasn't the whole truth. The reports made it sound like Molly had been stealing trade secrets to sell to competitors, but I knew that wasn't right. I'd seen the bank records, the donation receipts, the evidence of where that money had actually gone. I started digging deeper, using every research skill I'd ever learned. I contacted journalists, activists, lawyers, anyone who might be able to help me understand what was really happening. What I found was even more complicated than I'd imagined. Molly had been working as a double agent for years, but not in the way the media portrayed. She'd been feeding her father information, yes, but she'd also been documenting everything. Every illegal dump, every bribe, every cover-up. She'd been building a case against Vega Corporation from the inside, gathering evidence that would have been impossible to obtain any other way. The arrest hadn't been about corporate espionage. It had been a desperate attempt by Richard Vega to silence his daughter before she could expose him. But Molly had been smart. She'd been careful. And she'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. The day before her hearing, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of, Miss Chen. "This is David Rodriguez. I represent Molly Vega, and she's asked me to give you something." He handed me a flash drive and a letter. "She wants you to know that she's going to plead guilty to the conspiracy charges." "What? Why?" "Because in exchange for her testimony, the DA has agreed to launch a full investigation into Vega Corporation's environmental crimes. She's going to expose everything." I read the letter that night, tears streaming down my face. "Elaine, I know. You hate me right now, and I understand why. I lied to you about who I was, what I was doing, why I was doing it. But I need you to know that I never lied about how I felt about you. The flash drive contains everything, years of documentation, recordings, evidence of every crime Vega Corp has committed. I need you to get it to the press to make sure the story gets told properly. Not the story they want to tell, but the real story. I'm going to prison, probably for a long time. But if this works, if we can take down the company, if we can stop the poisoning and the cover-ups and the corruption, then it will have been worth it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve your help. But I'm asking anyway, because you're the only person I trust to make sure this matters. The collective will continue without me. Sarah knows what to do. But they'll need someone who understands the whole picture, someone who can help them navigate what comes next. I love you. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but it's true. I loved you from the moment you whispered, "Oh, fuck," in that dance class. I loved you when you let me drag you to the warehouse. I loved you when you came to the fundraiser and looked at me like I was someone worth believing in. I love you now, even though I know you can't love me back. Make this mean something, Elaine. Make it all mean something. Molly, I spent the next week working with journalists, lawyers, and activists to prepare for the biggest environmental expose in decades. When the story broke, it was front page news everywhere. Not just the local papers, but national media, international coverage. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of illegal dumping, bribery, cover-ups, and environmental destruction. The health impacts were staggering: cancer clusters, birth defects, contaminated water supplies affecting thousands of people. But the most powerful part of the story was the human element. The young woman who'd spent years gathering evidence against her own father's company, who'd risked everything to expose the truth. The day of Molly's sentencing, I was in the courtroom. I hadn't seen her since the night she was arrested, and she looked smaller somehow, more fragile. But when she stood to address the judge, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. "Your Honor," she said, "I've committed crimes against the company that bears my name. I've violated trust, broken laws, and hurt people I care about. But I've also helped expose crimes that have poisoned our water, sickened our children, and destroyed our environment for profit." She looked directly at me then, and I felt that familiar electric shock. "I accept responsibility for my actions," she continued. "All of them. The ones I'm being sentenced for today, and the ones that led to this moment. I hope that someday the people I've hurt will understand that I was trying to do the right thing, even when I did it in the wrong way." The judge sentenced her to 3 years in federal prison, but with the possibility of parole in 18 months, given her cooperation with the investigation. As they led her away, she looked back at me one more time. "Thank you," she mouthed. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. 18 months later, I was standing in front of the newly constructed headquarters of the Clearwater Environmental Trust, watching as workers installed the sign over the entrance. The settlement had been unprecedented. After the investigation revealed the full scope of Vega Corporation's environmental crimes, the company had agreed to pay $2.3 billion in damages and establish a youth-led environmental trust to oversee cleanup efforts and prevent future contamination. I'd been named as the trust's executive director, a job I'd never imagined wanting but couldn't refuse. The work was hard, complicated, and sometimes heartbreaking, but it was also meaningful in a way that my old life had never been. Sarah had taken over day-to-day operations of the collective, which had grown from a small group of activists into a regional movement with chapters in 12 cities. We worked closely with the trust, identifying priorities, organizing community action, and holding corporations accountable. The warehouse where Molly had first shown me what it meant to really dance had been converted into a community center, with space for environmental education, legal aid, and, yes, dance classes. We'd kept the graffiti, the exposed brick, the scents, of raw possibility that had made it special. I still taught dance there, twice a week classes for kids whose parents couldn't afford the fancy studios, for adults who wanted to move their bodies and feel alive. I wasn't great at it, but I was good enough, and more importantly, I understood what it meant to discover something about yourself you didn't know was there. The day Molly was released from prison, I was there waiting for her. She looked older, more serious, but when she saw me, she smiled that same devastating smile that had started everything. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. We drove back to the city in silence, both of us processing the weight of everything that had happened, everything that had changed. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said finally. "I wasn't sure either, right up until I was walking through the prison gates." "But you did?" "Yeah, I did." We stopped at a coffee shop, not one of the fancy places we used to go to, but a simple diner where no one would recognize her, where we could just be two people trying to figure out what came next. "I saw the news about the trust," she said. "You're doing incredible work. We're doing incredible work. This was your vision, Molly. I'm just trying to honor it. It's more than that, and you know it. You've built something I never could have imagined." We talked for hours about the trust, about the collective, about the environmental movement and how it had evolved. But we didn't talk about us, not directly. Finally, as the sun was setting, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Is there any chance?" she started, then stopped. "I mean, I know I don't have the right to ask, but ... but I still love you. I know that's unfair. I know you've moved on. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. But I needed you to know." I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd changed everything about my life, who'd shown me what it meant to care about something bigger than myself, who'd broken my heart and put it back together in a completely different shape. "I love you too," I said. "That's the problem. It doesn't have to be a problem, doesn't it? How do we trust each other? How do we build something real when everything we had before was built on secrets and lies?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "We start over. We tell the truth this time, all of it." I looked down at our joined hands, at the way her thumb traced circles on my palm, at the way my body still responded to her touch like it was coming home. "I don't know if I can do that," I said. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You're the bravest person I know," she said. "You took on a multinational corporation and won. You've been running an environmental trust for 18 months. You've been living without me, which I know wasn't easy. Living without you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Then don't do it anymore." We didn't jump back into anything. We couldn't. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken and rebuilt and broken again. But we started talking. Really talking in ways we never had before. Molly moved into a small apartment across town, nothing fancy, but clean and bright with windows that faced east so she could watch the sunrise. She got a job at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people find work, and she started going to therapy. I kept running the trust, kept teaching dance classes, kept trying to figure out who I was in this new world we'd all helped create. We met for coffee once a week, then twice, then almost every day. We talked about everything: her childhood, my loneliness, the weight of secrets, the cost of revolution. We talked about the people we'd been before we met each other, the people we'd become, the people we wanted to be. "I think I fell in love with you because you were safe," she told me one afternoon as we walked through the park where we'd held our first protest. "Not boring safe, but emotionally safe. You made me feel like I could be myself without having to perform or strategize or manipulate. But then you did manipulate me. I manipulated the situation. I never manipulated how I felt about you. How do I know the difference?" She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Because I'm telling you now. Because I'm not hiding anything anymore. Because I'm giving you the choice to know everything about me, good and bad and complicated. And she did. Over the months that followed, she told me everything about growing up as the daughter of a man she both loved and despised, about the first time she realized what her father's company was really doing, about the years of trying to change things from the inside, the compromises that felt like betrayals, the way she'd learned to live with the weight of secrets. She told me about the other activists she'd had to mislead, the relationships she'd sacrificed, the pieces of herself she'd lost along the way. I became so good at lying, she said one evening as we sat on my couch, her head in my lap, my fingers running through her hair. I became so good at compartmentalizing, at being different people in different situations. I forgot how to just be myself. Who is yourself? I asked. I'm still figuring that out, but I think she's someone who dances, like no one's watching. Someone who fights for what she believes in, even when it's hard. Someone who loves you so completely it scares her. I was falling for her again. Or maybe I'd never stopped falling, had just been in free fall for 2 years, waiting for a safe place to land. The breakthrough came 6 months after her release. At the warehouse turned community center. We were there late one evening, me preparing for the next day's classes, her helping me move equipment. The sound system was still on from the kids' class that had ended an hour earlier, playing a playlist of songs that had become the soundtrack to our new life. Something slow and soulful came on, not the raw, edgy music we danced to in the old days, but something softer, more honest. Dance with me, Molly said suddenly. Here, now, just us. I looked around the space, the same exposed brick, the same graffiti, but transformed into something hopeful rather than rebellious. I don't know if I remember how. Your body remembers. She held out her hand, and I took it, letting her pull me into the center of the space. We moved slowly at first, tentatively, like we were learning each other's bodies all over again. But gradually, as the music washed over us, as the familiar rhythm of moving together took hold, we found our way back to each other, not the desperate, secret passion of before, but something deeper, more sustainable. I missed this, she whispered, her forehead against mine. I missed you. I'm here now. Are you really? Instead of answering with words, she kissed me, soft and sure and completely present. When we broke apart, I could see tears in her eyes. I'm here, she said. No secrets, no agendas, no games. Just me wanting to build something real with you. We made love that night for the first time in almost 3 years on the floor of the warehouse where we'd first discovered what it meant to let go of control. It was different than before, less frantic, more intentional. We took our time relearning the math of each other's bodies, discovering new territories of trust and vulnerability. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the yoga mats I pulled down from the storage closet, her head on my chest, my fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. I want to try again, I said into the darkness. But I need you to promise me something, anything, no more secrets, even the small ones. Even the ones you think will protect me, I promise. And I need time. I need to trust you again, and that's going to take time. I have time, she said, pressing a kiss to my collarbone. I have all the time in the world. Rebuilding trust, it turns out, is harder than falling in love. It's messier, more complicated, requires more patience than either of us had imagined. There were good days and bad days. Days when I looked at Molly and felt nothing but love, and days when I remembered the betrayal so sharply it took my breath away. Days when she was patient and understanding, and days when I could see the effort it took for her not to push, not to demand forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. But we kept showing up. We kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Molly started volunteering at the trust, working with communities affected by environmental damage. She was brilliant at it. Her combination of insider knowledge and genuine passion made her an invaluable advocate. But more than that, I got to see her do the work she'd always claimed to care about, openly and honestly. "You're different," I told her one evening as we walked home from a community meeting where she'd helped residents understand their legal options for dealing with contaminated groundwater. "Different how?" Later. "Like you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders anymore." She smiled. "I'm carrying it differently, sharing the load." We started going to couples therapy, which was awkward and painful and absolutely necessary. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped us understand the patterns we'd fallen into, the ways we'd hurt each other, the work we needed to do to build something healthier. "Trust isn't something you either have or don't have," she told us during one particularly difficult session. "It's something you build day by day, choice by choice." "But how do you build it when it's been broken so completely?" I asked. "By being trustworthy, by choosing to be vulnerable, by believing that the other person is worth the risk." The work was exhausting. Some days I wanted to give up, to go back to my safe, predictable life before Molly had turned everything upside down. But then I'd remember what it felt like to be fully alive, to care about something bigger than myself, to love someone so completely that losing them felt like losing a limb. And slowly, gradually, we started to heal. 8 months after Molly's release, the trust received a massive donation from an anonymous source. $3 million, with a note that simply said, "For the next generation of environmental warriors." We were in the middle of a board meeting when the call came in, and I had to excuse myself to take it privately. "Miss Chun," said the voice. On the other end, "This is Patricia Williams from First National Bank. We have a donor who wishes to remain anonymous, but they've specified that you should know the funds come from someone who believes in the work you're doing." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the number written on my notepad, $3 million. It would fund our operations for years, allow us to expand our legal aid program, support more community organizing efforts. But something about the timing, about the anonymity, made me suspicious. That evening, I confronted Molly about it. "Did you have anything to do with this donation?" She looked genuinely confused. "What donation?" I told her about the money, about the anonymous donor, about my suspicions. "Elaine, I don't have access to that kind of money, you know that? But your family does." Her face went pale. "You think my father donated money to the trust?" "I think someone with connections to your family did." She was quiet for a long moment, then reached for her phone. "I need to make a call." She dialed a number I'd never seen her call before. And when someone answered, she said, "Hello, Mom." I'd never heard Molly talk about her mother. In all our conversations about her family, about her childhood, her mother had been conspicuously absent. "I need to ask you something," Molly said into the phone. "Did you make a donation to the Clearwater Environmental Trust?" I could hear the response, though I couldn't make out the words. "Mom, ... why?" Another pause. "I understand." "No, I appreciate it, but I need you to understand that this complicates things." "Yes, I know you're proud of me, ... I love you too." She hung up and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "My mother," she said. "She's been following the trust's work, following what we've accomplished. She wanted to support it, but she couldn't do it openly because of the divorce proceedings." "Divorce proceedings?" "She left my father 6 months ago. Filed for divorce, moved to California, started going by her maiden name again. She said seeing me testify against him, seeing me willing to go to prison for what I believed in, gave her the courage to leave." I stared at her, processing this information. "Your mother left your father because of what you did." She said she'd been wanting to leave for years, but she was scared. Scared of what he'd do, scared of being alone, scared of losing everything. But watching me choose principle over comfort, watching me accept the consequences of my choices, it inspired her. And the money? It's from her divorce settlement. She said if I was willing to sacrifice everything to protect the environment, the least she could do was help fund the work. I felt tears starting to form in my own eyes. Molly ... She wants to meet you, she said. She says she wants to thank the woman who helped her daughter find her courage. Meeting Margaret Williams, she'd gone back to her maiden name after. The divorce was like seeing a glimpse of who Molly might become in 20 years. Same fierce intelligence, same passion for justice, but tempered by years of experience and hard-won wisdom. I spent 30 years married to a man who valued profit over people. She told me over lunch at a small cafe downtown. I told myself I was being practical, that I was protecting my daughter, that I could influence him from the inside. But really, I was just scared. It takes courage to leave, I said. It takes courage to stay and fight too, which is what my daughter did, and what you're doing now. She told me about watching Molly grow up in the shadow of her father's company, about the arguments at family dinners when Molly would challenge his environmental policies, about the way Molly had tried to change things from within the system. She got that from me, Margaret said. The belief that you can fix things if you just work hard enough, if you just find the right approach. But some things can't be fixed from the inside. Sometimes you have to burn it all down and start over. Is that what she did? That's what you both did. You helped each other find the courage to tell the truth, even when it was dangerous. The conversation gave me new perspective on Molly's choices, on the impossible position she'd been in, on the courage it had taken to finally choose exposure over protection. That evening, I found Molly in the warehouse, teaching a class for teenagers from the local high school. She was showing them how to use movement to express anger, frustration, hope, all the emotions that came with caring about the world and feeling powerless to change it. Feel it in your body, she was telling them. Don't just think about climate change. Don't just worry about it. Let your body tell the story of what that fear feels like, what that anger looks like when it moves through you. I watched from the doorway as 15 teenagers threw themselves into the movement, their bodies expressing things they probably couldn't put into words. And I saw Molly as she really was, not the complicated woman with the impossible family situation, but a teacher, a healer, someone who helped other people find their own power. When the class ended, she approached me with that questioning look. She got when she wasn't sure how I was feeling. Your mom told me about the family dinners, I said. About how you used to challenge your father. She told you about that? She told me a lot of things. About how proud she is of you. About how you've been fighting this fight longer than anyone knows. Molly's eyes filled with tears. I never felt like I was fighting hard enough. I always felt like I should be doing more, should be braver, should be willing to sacrifice more. You sacrificed everything. Your relationship with your father, your freedom, your reputation. You sacrificed us, I know. And I'd do it again, if that's what it took to stop what he was doing. But I'd do it differently. I'd trust you with the truth from the beginning. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. I know you would. Does that mean you forgive me? I thought about it, really thought about it. About the months of lies, the betrayal, the way she'd let me believe in something that wasn't entirely real. But I also thought about the years of evidence she'd gathered, the risks she'd taken, the way she'd chosen truth over comfort when it mattered most. I forgive you, I said. But more than that, I understand you. I understand why you made the choices you made, even the ones that hurt you, even those. Especially those. A year after our reconciliation, Molly proposed to me in the place where we'd first fallen in love, the old warehouse, now transformed into a thriving community center. It was after a particularly successful fundraising event. The space was still decorated with lights and flowers, the lingering energy of celebration in the air. Most of the guests had gone home, but a few volunteers were still cleaning up. "Dance with me," Molly said, just like she had that night months earlier when we'd first found our way back to each other. But this time, when we moved together, she pulled a ring from her pocket. "I know we've been through hell," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo. But I also know that what we have is worth fighting. FOR, worth building a life around." The ring was simple, beautiful, a single stone surrounded by smaller ones, like a flower or a star. "It's made from recycled gold," she said, "from electronics that would have ended up in landfills. I wanted it to mean something, to represent the way we've taken something broken and made it into something beautiful." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd changed my life, who'd broken my heart and put it back together, who taught me what it meant to care about something bigger than myself. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to build a life with me, to fight for, the planet together, to dance together until we're too old to move, to trust each other with everything, even the hard stuff, especially the hard stuff." I thought about the journey we'd been on, the way we'd hurt each other and healed each other, the way we'd learned to choose love even when it was difficult. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The handful of volunteers who were still there erupted in cheers, and Sarah started crying, and someone turned up the music so we could dance properly. But all I could focus on was Molly, the way she looked at me like I was the most important thing in the world, the way she held me like she was never going to let me go. We got married 6 months later in the community garden that had been built on the site of Vega Corporation's former headquarters. The company had been dissolved after the scandal, its assets liquidated to pay for environmental cleanup. The building had been torn down, and in its place, the community had created something beautiful, a space for growing food, for gathering, for celebrating life. It felt like the perfect metaphor for what we'd built together. Something beautiful, growing from the ashes of something destructive. The wedding was small, just our closest friends and family, the people who'd supported us through the hardest times. Margaret was there, radiant in her freedom. Sarah gave a toast about the power of love to change the world. The teenagers from Molly's dance class performed a piece they'd choreographed themselves about transformation and hope. But the moment I'll remember forever was when Molly and I had our first dance as a married couple. We chose the same song that had been playing the night we met, River by Bishop Briggs, but this time we danced to it slowly, intimately, like we had all the time in the world. "Remember when you whispered, 'oh fuck,' in that first dance class?" Molly murmured in my ear. How could I forget? It was the moment my life changed. Mine too. I knew right then that you were going to be trouble, the good kind of trouble, the best kind of trouble. As we swayed together, I thought about everything we'd been through, everything we'd learned about love and truth, and the courage it takes to fight for what matters. I thought about the trust we'd built, the community we'd created, the way we'd learned to choose each other every day. "What are you thinking about?" Molly asked. "The future. What we're going to build together. What do you want to build? A life that matters. A love that lasts. A world that's better than the one we inherited." That's a tall order. Good thing we're not doing it alone. Around us, our friends and family were laughing, dancing, celebrating. The community garden was full of life, vegetables growing, children playing, adults sharing stories and dreams. It was everything we'd fought for made manifest. "I love you," Molly said, spinning me around. "I love you too," I replied, letting myself be spun, letting myself trust in the movement and the moment. and the promise of all the dances still to come. Now, 5 years later, as I tell you this story, I'm sitting in my office at the Trust looking out at the community garden where we got married. Molly is teaching a class in the warehouse, and I can hear the music, the laughter, the sound of people discovering what it means to move their bodies with intention and joy. We've built something beautiful together. Not just our marriage, but a movement, a community, a new way of thinking about what's possible when people choose to care about something bigger than themselves. The Clearwater Environmental Trust now operates in 15 states, providing legal aid, community organizing support, and environmental education to thousands of people. The warehouse has become a model for community-based environmental action replicated in cities across the country. And Molly and I, we're still dancing, still fighting, still choosing each other every day. It hasn't been easy. Love never is, especially when it's built on the foundation of broken trust and rebuilt from the ground up. But it's been worth it. Every difficult conversation, every moment of doubt, every choice to stay and fight instead of running away, it's all been worth it. People ask me sometimes if I regret falling in love with someone so complicated, someone whose family legacy caused so much damage, but I don't regret it. I can't regret the love that taught me who I really was, that showed me what I was capable of, that gave me the courage to fight for something bigger than myself, because that's what love does when it's real. It doesn't just make you happy, though, it does that too. It makes you braver. It makes you more compassionate. It makes you willing to take risks for something that matters. And Molly, she's still teaching people to dance, still fighting for environmental justice, still challenging herself and everyone around her to be better. But now she does it openly, honestly, with no secrets between us. We're planning to adopt a child. Soon a little girl whose parents died in a chemical plant accident, whose case the trust has been following. We want to give her the kind of love that teaches her she can change the world, that shows her what it means to choose courage over comfort. I think about that scared, lonely woman who walked into that dance class 6 years ago, who had never felt anything deeply, who thought passion was something that happened to other people. I barely recognize her now. That's what happens when you let yourself be transformed by love. When you choose to dance with someone who sees who you really are and loves you anyway. When you build something together that's bigger than either of you could have created alone. The music from Molly's class is getting louder now, and I can hear her voice calling out encouragement to her students. Feel it in your body. Don't think so much. Trust the movement. I close my laptop and head toward the warehouse because the work can wait, but the dance is happening right now, and I don't want to miss a single moment of it. After all, this is what we fought for. This is what we built. This is what love looks like when it's brave enough to tell the truth, strong enough to survive betrayal, and committed enough to keep dancing no matter what the world throws at it. And we're still dancing. We're still fighting. We're still choosing each other every single day. The music swells, and I can see Molly through the windows, her body moving with that same fluid grace that first captured my attention all those years ago. She sees me approaching and smiles, that devastating smile that started everything, and extends her hand. "Dance with me," she says, just like she did that very first night. And I do, I always will. Because some invitations are too important to refuse. Some dances are too beautiful to sit out. Some loves are too powerful to walk away from, even when they're complicated, even when they're difficult, even when they require everything you have to give. We dance, and the world keeps spinning, and somewhere in the movement, in the trust, in the choice to keep showing up for each other, we find the thing that makes it all worthwhile. We find love, real love, the kind that changes everything, the kind that lasts,